I can't. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired of trying to justify this character as good. No matter what the fan base of this character says, no matter how much they say that he's good or decent, I can't agree. Xiao sucks. Before anything else, this is me explaining my stance on him as a playable character. I still think he's pretty cool in lore with all the edge he's got. You're welcome to like him, he's got some cool moments in the story, but holy hell is he just the worst feeling good character to play. How he plays, his viable teams, and the design of his entire moveset. Before I get into my piece, let's bring you up to speed on what he does. Xiao is an animal polearm DPS character designed around using his AoE plunge attacks that he gets after using his elemental burst. Designed around. We're not talking jank builds today, but what we will talk about are his talents. Xiao's normal attack is a 6-hit chain of swings, but more importantly are his charged and, more obviously, his plunging attacks. His charge attack is unique to him, and is an upward scoop that can knock up enemies. This has its uses as a way to stagger some bigger enemies and throw smaller ones into the air. His standalone plunge attack is a normal plunge attack like every other polearm character, but of course, we'll get back to it. Xiao's elemental skill, Lemnistatic Wind Cycling, is a forward lunge in whatever direction you hold that does animal damage, passes through smaller enemies, and generates 3 particles. I'm mentioning the particle part for Xiao because it's important for later. It starts with 2 charges at base, and you can use it mid-air. Not the biggest part of his moveset because that's kind of where the explanation ends, but it's got good scaling on it. Now the big part. Xiao's Elemental Burst, Bane of All Evil, is the core of his moveset design, unlocks his plunging attack playstyle, as well as his main issue. On cast, Xiao puts on his Yaksha mask that will make him jump higher, increase the AoE and damage of his normal charged and plunging attacks, and gives those same attacks an animal infusion that can't be overwritten. His burst has a 15-second duration, 18-second cooldown, and a 70 energy cost. Him doing this has some drawbacks in lore. So of course it had to carry into his playable moveset too! In this state, Xiao will continuously lose HP over the duration of this ability, with the percentage of HP he loses going down with talent levels. Also, not mentioned in any of the skill descriptions is the fact that using his skill during his burst state will not generate any energy particles. Again, remember that for later. The damage bonus is pretty sizable, and pretty much makes him viable to use as an actual character. More or less. I have more things to say about it, but just know that the 70 energy cost is a bit much. Passives! He has those. Xiao's first Ascension passive gives him a further damage bonus that scales with the time he's in his burst state, starting at 5% and going up by another 5% for every 3 seconds, scaling up to a maximum of 25% after 12 seconds. You'll naturally get this by just playing the character, so it's pretty nice. His A4 passive is kinda whatever, but it doesn't interfere with how he plays, so sure. After using his elemental skill once, the next uses of his skill within 7 seconds will have their damage increased by 15%. Small damage buff, but it doesn't really get that much value until C6. Which is to say, it doesn't get value because his C6 doesn't get to do much. For talent leveling priority, invest in his normal attack first, as that's mainly where his damage is coming from, with his burst being next for the damage bonus. And lastly, his skill, since it makes up the smallest portion of his damage. Pretty simple character, right? Well, the Xiao mains would probably say that I'm wrong, but at a baseline, he's pretty easy to understand since he was one of the first 5 stars in beta that people actually knew about. Actually, while we're on the topic, let's go over his constellations, or more like the one constellation. Xiao C1 should really be considered his only one, not because it's that good, but that all of his other ones really blow loads. It adds another charge to his elemental skill. That's it. Of course, it can help reduce his energy requirement by a little. Not really. It can help make use of his A4 passive. Again, not really. But instead of zooming twice, you can now do it again. From here, it's mostly downhill. Xiao C2 will give him 25% more energy recharge when he's off field. What the fuck is the point of this? Xiao is supposed to be taking up most of a team's field time with him generally having high energy requirements, so you don't give him the needed energy recharge when he can generate particles for himself, but instead only when he can't? What sort of ass backwards design is this shit? C3 gives his skill 3 talent levels. You get more damage, but it doesn't matter all that much before C6. The meme constellation. If you've played the game for long enough, you'd surely have heard about it before. Say it with me. When Xiao's HP falls below 50%, he gains a 100% defense bonus. Sounds great, right? His burst drains his HP the longer you're in it. So this is great for making him tankier. Yet no. Most of his teams will have healers, shielders, or both. So when built properly, he's never going under 50% HP. Even if we were to take Farina into consideration, your healers should be able to counteract that just fine. So in actuality, this is another constellation that does absolutely nothing. C5 gives 3 talent levels to Xiao's Elemental Burst, which means more damage percent. I'm gonna be real, the itty bitty percentage upgrade from this constellation is not that big of a help. Alright, the big C6. How good is it? While in his burst state, if he hits at least 2 enemies with a plunging attack, he gets a charge of his skill back, and for the next second, he can use his skill as much as he wants while ignoring its cooldown. In theory, this sounds pretty OP, upgrading his damage by a huge amount since you can use a skill around 3 to 4 times after landing a plunge attack on 2 or more enemies, and can change his whole playstyle to be skill spam. In practice though, it does nothing. Most difficult content in Genshin is based around beating one enemy with super high HP. The part requiring you to hit at least 2 enemies keeps this constellation from ever being procced. Now don't get me wrong, when it works, it can get him to do a lot of damage and be really fun. I'll leave a link to the Xiaomi's document about it in the description, but because the game never lets you use it, it's basically wasted Prima Gems. So most of his constellations are horrendous, and even the ones that sound good are useless in practical gameplay. Those are out of the way now, so what's the best for him in terms of artifacts? Let's start with his best sets. If you're purely looking to do plunge attacks, so from C0 to C5, the Long Night's Oath 4-piece effect is the best for Xiao. It can give up to 100% plunge attack damage bonus when it's fully maxed out, basically his best set overall. Even if you were to assume that he's only working with 4 stacks, the damage percent is still huge for Xiao. This is the set to farm if you don't already have one. Next is the 4-piece of Vermilion Hereafter. 18% attack on the 2-piece bonus and up to 48% more attack after using a burst and losing HP 4 times, making a total of 66% attack. Look at it as basically on par with the Long Night's Oath if you already have a really good set of this, although this is slightly better for C6 Xiao players. Whenever it works, since it's an attack buff and not specific to just plunge damage. A similar set to these two is the 4-piece of Marechaussee Hunter. 15% normal charge damage bonus on the 2-piece effect, and up to 36% crit rate after your HP changes 3 times. You may overcap on crit rate, but it's pretty synergistic with him, and especially so if you're using Farina with him. That's it for the sets that are worth mentioning. Stat-wise, he's pretty simple. For main stats, go attack percent on the Sands because he scales on attack percent. Duh. The Goblet slot is a little hit or miss with either an animal damage main stat or more attack percent. Generally though, animal damage bonus is better in most cases. For the circlet, use either crit damage or crit rate depending on which one you need more of. For substats, try to get enough energy recharge so that he can use his burst every rotation, since, well, he's supposed to be the main character doing damage, and he can't do that unless his burst is up. Next are your crits, then attack percent. Now let's get into his best weapons. For Xiao's best weapons, his overall best is the Primordial Jade-Winged Spear that can be pulled from the permanent weapon pool. High base attack, some amount of crit rate, and an attack stacking passive that gives damage percent when fully maxed out. Nothing more to it other than it being incredibly good for him. Use this if you have it, which you probably do. Next is the Staff of Homa. Good base attack, a fat crit damage secondary, and an attack buffing passive scaling off his max HP that increases if he's under half. Don't bother trying to get the bigger buff from being under 50% because of the sacrifices you'd have to make for it. It is still really good even ignoring the conditional passive. Lumineers the Elegy is like the crit rate variant of Staff of Homa. Again, don't bother with the conditional passive, just take this weapon for the secondary and passive stats. Getting into the rest of the 5-star weapons, Xiao can use the Vortex Vanquisher or Calamity Queller pretty nicely, though Vortex will require a shielder, namely Zhongli, to max out its attack stacking effect. On to the notable 4-star weapons, there's the Deathmatch you can get from the Battle Pass. The stats it gives are nice, but the 36% crit rate can get you to overcap pretty easily. Still a great weapon if you have none of the 5-star ones. For other options, there's the event banner exclusive Prospector's Drill and the Black Cliff Pull from the Stardust Shop. Both are just alright. If you have a deathmatch or anything better, use one of those instead. For Xiao's teams, the priority is to set up a bunch of effects that help him do the most damage he can. I mean, he's one of those old hyper carries that shouldn't swap out unless their infusion mechanic is over. Like I said, we're not talking about janky teams in this video, though those certainly do exist. Xiao's current best team is with Farazan, Xianyun, and Farina. Farazan is still one of the few sources of animal res reduction on enemies, so she's a no-brainer. The big problem is that Farazan is significantly worse before C6, with her stupid high energy requirements and almost horrible supportability at anything lower than C6. Xianyun's big points are more animal particles, team-wide healing, plunge attack crit rate, and an additive base damage bonus to plunging attacks that scale off her total attack. The healing works especially well with Farina to counteract both her HP drain and Xiao's own, whilst also quickly stacking Fanfare to give a bigger damage buff. Overall, this team is best for Xiao because of the amount of energy being generated to fuel the entire party, all the buffs you're getting, and the fact that you won't have to sit in a circle for any of it. That is the team. The other options might as well be coping mechanisms, but here they are anyway. Now for the real reason you're watching this video. Remember all those asterisks from earlier? Let's start with Xiao's energy management. As I said before, to make him actually usable in harder content, he needs to use his burst. His burst costs 70 energy. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Well, as I said before, he can't generate particles from his skill in his burst state, which basically means he can't get energy in his burst. So you'd think the solution is to funnel all the energy to him, right? Well, unless you've got stupid high amounts of ER on your supports or a C6 Farazan, it's not happening without some struggling for the rest of the team. Even with his 2 skill uses, Xiao can't reliably get his burst back up on cooldown. To do that, you need to build a stupid amount of recharge on him, which would break into his stats he needs for his damage. And unlike Raiden, he doesn't have anything in his moveset that directly scales off of energy recharge. But guess what? Without the best supports and a C6 Farazan, that's mid as hell too. The fact that he's Animo doesn't do any favors for his damage potential at all. Not being able to multiply his damage with a reaction is a huge setback to how much damage he can do. As if that wasn't bad enough, he's Animo, right? So you tell me why he pushes enemies away instead of, following one of the major gimmicks of the element, which is to be good at grouping. With bosses, this is a non-issue, but against smaller enemies, his repelling force is so strong that you end up having to chase down every enemy just to hit them. This is what deterred me from wanting to play him, because it was so damn annoying to get shit done because he'd just keep pushing enemies outside his plunge attack range. This creates another problem. If you don't have Farina, or more to the point here, Xianyun, your next best buffer is Bennett. Without the huge attack buff from Bennett, Farazan's buffs aren't enough to carry his damage. You know what that means? You gotta sit in a circle for the buffs to do anything worthwhile. What that also means is, because you're knocking those smaller enemies away, you don't get to stay in the circle unless you reposition your plunges to push them back in. You can't tell me you'd want to do that with a straight face. Wouldn't it have made more sense for him to create a vortex that sucks enemies in wherever he plunges? Look, I get lore reasons, how he works as a demon repellent and all that. But god damn it! When you're trying to sell a main DPS character with limited on-field time because of his burst, designing that character around plunging attacks that knock enemies away that's not able to generate energy inside of his burst, I don't care about lore at that point. Having to adjust the game to consider a character's flaws isn't fun. Look, I get that C6 Farazan solves most of these issues, but that's requiring Constellations on another character for a hyper carry to not feel like trash to play. I'd like to remind you that I think Xiao is fun in concept. A plunge attack on-fielder that goes swing swing. That's cool. But all the setbacks of his element and how his moveset ties together make him infuriating to operate without the C6 on Farazan. Naturally, I should try to be constructive with this kind of video and come up with ideas on how to solve these problems. But that's the thing. I can't. Not because I don't have solutions, but because the solutions are already there. Only problem is that they are extremely expensive solutions. Almost no other character has pissed me off this much when trying to play them. This is a whole different conundrum, but it's not her turn yet. Some characters that have similar gameplay loops to Xiao are Itto and Sino. Itto has a team that can be extremely flexible and cheap to build. He really only needed one character to get off the ground, Goro. And that wasn't a problem because you always got them both on the same banner release. Going further, even if Goro has the same ridiculous ER requirement as Farazan, he didn't need his Constellations. You can run him at C0 and operate the team fine since Itto helped with Goro's energy requirements. How? He can generate energy from Ushi inside of his burst. Sure, Goro's Constellations made him better, but you didn't need them for Ito to function. Scion can generate particles in his burst and has flexible team setups. Again, sure, his best team can be expensive, but by no means do you need it to make him usable. You see the problem I have with this motherfucker? You can try to attest it to him being an older character, but can you really? Farazan at C0 is both a solution and another problem. Trade offer. I buff your animal damage and reduce animal res on enemies. You get another energy hog. This character was released in 3.3, a whole 2 years after Xiao. I get that she was released alongside Wanderer as his primary buffer, but animal lol. So Xiao was also included in the conversation. You couldn't work in some sort of animal energy regeneration into her moveset? Oh, then don't play him if you don't like him! That's not the point here. I intentionally pulled for him, trying to make him and play him the best I could. And hell, I think I did pretty well with that. But at the end of it all, I could not find enough good things to say about him to overshadow the bad stuff. Now, a lot of it could be attributed to me not having a C6 Farazan, but that really shouldn't be the case at all. I should not need a completely different character to be at C6 before the character I want to use starts to not feel like a chore to play. But that's the end of my piece. As much as I can think of anyways. For more details, check out the Coaching Mains page or Xiao Main's Bible on the character if you want to know more. Thanks for watching all the way through, and I'll catch you in the next upload. See ya.